Imagine standing at the altar, ready to marry the person you believe is your soulmate, only to realise your entire love story was built on a lie, a cruel, calculated bet. But what if the person being played was actually the one pulling all the strings? This is the story of a game of hearts where the stakes were a multi-million-dollar fortune, and the final move, made in front of hundreds of wedding guests, left everyone absolutely speechless. It's a tale of how the deepest deception can forge the strongest resolve. In the glass and steel canyons of Manhattan, Julian Thorne was a king. At 38, he had built an empire, apex performance, a brand synonymous with physical and financial perfection. His life was a curated gallery of success, from exclusive fitness centers to a best-selling line of supplements. His body was a testament to his merciless discipline. For Julian, control was everything, and weakness, especially the perceived weakness of being overweight, was an unforgivable sin. He saw it as a moral failing. Across the bridge, in a cozy Brooklyn brownstone filled with the scent of old paper and brewing tea, lived Chloe Davis. At 34, she was a brilliant literature teacher at a prestigious private academy. Chloe inhabited a world of stories, of complex characters and hidden meanings. She had long struggled with her weight and the insecurities that came with it, finding comfort not in calorie counts, but in the boundless worlds offered by the books that lined her walls. Their paths were never meant to cross until a careless bet, fueled by arrogance and expensive whiskey, set them on a devastating collision course. The night air was crisp on the rooftop of the private Manhattan club. Below, the city glittered like a carpet of scattered diamonds. Julian Thorne swirled the amber liquid in his crystal glass, the ice clinking softly. He was surrounded by his inner circle, men who, like him, measured life in market shares and personal bests. Marcus, his oldest friend and business rival, leaned forward, a sly grin playing on his lips. "Julian, we all know you can conquer any market and date any model," he began, his voice a low challenge. "But what about a real challenge? Something outside your pristine, optimized world?" Julian raised a sculpted eyebrow, a mix of amusement and disdain in his eyes. He exuded an aura of untouchable confidence. "I don't waste my time on lost causes, Marcus. You know that." The implication was clear. Anything outside his world of perfection was exactly that, a lost cause. Marcus's grin widened. He knew exactly which buttons to push. "That's where you're wrong. This is the ultimate test of your famous powers of persuasion." He lowered his voice, drawing the others in. "I propose a wager. You will court, win over, and marry a woman who is the complete opposite of your usual type. A woman with a little extra substance." He paused for effect. "And you have to stay married for 6 months. No scandals, no quick annulment. If you succeed, we each pay you $500,000. There are 6 of us, 3 million, tax-free." The group erupted in a chorus of murmurs and chuckles. The air crackled with the thrill of a cruel game. For these men, people were just pawns, and emotions were commodities to be leveraged. Julian felt a familiar surge of competitive fire. The money was irrelevant, but the challenge to his dominance was everything. A flicker of a smile touched Julian's lips. It was a cold, predatory thing. The absurdity of the idea was insulting, yet the sheer audacity of it was intoxicating, proving he could bend anyone to his will. Even someone so far removed from his world was a temptation he couldn't resist. "And who is this lucky lady?" Julian asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Marcus was ready. He slid his phone across the polished table. On the screen was a faculty photo from an elite private school. He pointed to a woman with kind eyes and a soft, intelligent face. "Chloe Davis, my son's literature teacher, 34, smart, sweet, and has been battling her weight her whole life. She's authentic, the kind of woman you've never even noticed exists." Julian stared at the photo. His mind, trained to find flaws, immediately began its cold assessment. "She's a project," he thought, "a variable to be controlled." He looked up at his friends, his eyes gleaming. "I accept." Across the river in Brooklyn, Chloe Davis had no idea she had just become the centerpiece of a rich man's game. She was grading essays, a half-empty mug of chamomile tea by her side, her cat sleeping soundly on a pile of classic novels. The world of rooftop bars and multi-million-dollar wagers was as foreign to her as a distant planet. When her phone rang with an unknown number, she almost ignored it. A friendly, confident voice introduced himself as Marcus Vance, the father of one of her students. "Hi, Chloe. Hope I'm not disturbing you," he said smoothly. "Listen, this might sound a bit forward, but a very good friend of mine is a big admirer of your work. And you. He's a great guy, very successful, and he's been hoping for an introduction." Chloe was stunned into silence. An admirer? Her? It felt like a line from a badly written romance novel. Her mind raced, filled with skepticism. "Are you sure you have the right person?" Chloe asked, her voice laced with disbelief. Her experience with men had been limited, and often disappointing. The idea of a very successful man being interested in her seemed preposterous. She had built a fortress around her heart, constructed from years of feeling invisible. Marcus was persuasive, his words painting a picture of a man named Julian who was tired of the superficial dating scene and was looking for someone with depth and intelligence. "He saw you at a school fundraiser," Marcus lied effortlessly. "He was incredibly impressed. Just give him one dinner, Chloe." What's the harm? Against her better judgment, a tiny seed of curiosity was planted. Perhaps this was it. Perhaps this was the unexpected chapter she had only ever read about in books. After a long pause, she reluctantly agreed. Their first date was at a restaurant where the lighting was low and the prices were astronomical. The air smelled of truffle oil and quiet wealth. Chloe felt like an imposter in her simple, elegant dress, the one she saved for special occasions. When Julian stood to greet her, her breath caught. He was even more striking in person, radiating a power and intensity that was both intimidating and magnetic. "A project," his mind whispered, as he smiled and kissed her cheek. "Her posture is poor. Her wardrobe is a decade out of date. But her eyes are sharp." He immediately launched his charm offensive, a well-rehearsed performance of warmth and sincerity. He had to make her feel special, to disarm her defences, and to get her to trust him completely. The first phase of the plan was now in motion. As the evening wore on, Chloe found herself surprisingly at ease. Julian was an excellent conversationalist. He asked about her passion for literature, about the authors who shaped her, and he listened with an intensity that made her feel seen. When she spoke about her students, her face lit up with a genuine passion that he couldn't help but notice. It was a foreign concept to him, this pure, unadulterated love for something that didn't yield a profit. He found himself momentarily captivated, not by her appearance, but by the intricate workings of her mind. This was an unexpected complication. He was supposed to be the one in control, yet for a fleeting moment, he felt a flicker of genuine interest, a dangerous crack in his perfectly constructed facade. He quickly suppressed it. This was a game, and he was here to win. While Chloe was talking about the symbolism in The Great Gatsby, her favourite novel, Julian was running calculations. He analysed her speech patterns, her moments of hesitation, her flashes of insecurity. Every detail was a piece of data to be used. "She craves intellectual validation," he concluded. "She's been underestimated her whole life. That's the key." He steered the conversation towards his own empire, framing his ruthless ambition as a quest for excellence. He spoke of discipline and willpower, subtly planting the seeds of his core philosophy. He watched her reaction, gauging her every response. He was a master manipulator, and Chloe, who had spent her life feeling like a background character, was unknowingly auditioning for the lead role in his elaborate play. In the weeks that followed, Julian executed his plan with flawless precision. He created a whirlwind romance straight out of a Hollywood movie. There were surprise trips to art galleries, private dinners, and walks through Central Park under the autumn leaves. He made her feel as though she was the most fascinating woman in the world. Chloe, who had never experienced such devoted attention, began to let her guard down. The doubts that had plagued her for years started to quiet down. Could it be real? Could a man like Julian truly be interested in someone like her? She allowed herself to hope, to believe in the beautiful story he was weaving around her. She was falling in love, not just with him, but with the version of herself she saw reflected in his admiring eyes. One crisp afternoon, as they sat on a bench overlooking the park's reservoir, Chloe found the courage to open up about her deepest insecurity. "I've always struggled with my weight," she confessed, her gaze fixed on the distant skyline. "I've tried everything. Diets, gyms. I feel like I'm always failing." She expected judgment, or at best, a polite dismissal. It was a vulnerability she rarely shared. Julian took her hand, his touch gentle. He saw his opening. "That's not failure, Chloe," he said, his voice a carefully calibrated mix of empathy and strength. "It's not about a lack of willpower. Sometimes you just need the right system, the right support." His internal monologue was colder. "Pathetic excuses. A lack of discipline is all it is. But this is perfect. I will be her saviour." Julian's words were a balm to a wound Chloe had carried for a lifetime. He didn't see her as broken or weak. He saw potential. He made her believe that he could be the one to help her unlock it. His narrative was intoxicating. He was the strong, disciplined man who could guide her, protect her, and help her become the best version of herself. She started to trust him implicitly, sharing her dreams and fears. She was an open book, and he read every page, carefully noting every detail that would help him secure his victory. Yet with every honest confession she made, a strange and unwelcome feeling began to stir within him. It felt uncomfortably like guilt. He was building this entire relationship on a foundation of lies, and her raw, unguarded honesty made those lies feel heavier each day. Meanwhile, Julian's regular updates to his friends were met with roaring laughter and applause. "She's completely hooked," he announced at their usual rooftop spot, leaning back with a triumphant smirk. "She thinks I'm her knight in shining armour. She told me I'm the first man she's ever truly opened up to." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "You're a monster, Thorne, an absolute artist." They toasted to his success, their conversation filled with cynical jokes about Chloe's weight and her naivete. Julian laughed along with them, but the sound felt hollow in his own ears. The image of Chloe's trusting eyes, filled with sincere emotion, flashed in his mind. He pushed the thought away. He was too close to winning to let sentimentality derail him. The bet was everything. One evening, they were at Julian's minimalist penthouse, a sterile space of glass and chrome that overlooked the entire city. Chloe felt small and out of place amidst the cold perfection. Julian was in his home office taking a call, his voice a low murmur. Chloe wandered over to his desk, picking up a framed photo of him crossing a marathon finish line. As she set it down, his laptop screen lit up with a notification. It was a group chat, the one he had with his friends. The last message was from Marcus. "So when are you closing the deal? The 6-month clock doesn't start till you put a ring on the project." Chloe froze. The project. The words hit her like a physical blow. Her blood ran cold. The beautiful story, the whirlwind romance, the feeling of being seen, it all shattered in an instant. She felt the air leave her lungs. Her first instinct was to run, to scream, to confront him. But then, the mind of a literature teacher, a mind trained to analyse narratives and uncover hidden motives, took over. She thought of all the heroines in her books, the ones who were underestimated, betrayed, and then rose from the ashes. She realised this was not the end of her story. This was the inciting incident. She took a shaky breath, her mind racing. He was playing a game, and she had just learned the rules. A cold, quiet resolve settled over her. He thought she was a pawn. She would show him what it meant to be a queen. She would not just play his game, she would win it. From that moment on, Chloe became the ultimate actress. She pushed the hurt and betrayal deep down, burying it under a flawless performance of a woman deeply in love. Her laughter was a little brighter, her smiles a little wider. She played her part with an Oscar-worthy conviction. Julian, blinded by his own arrogance, saw only what he wanted to see, a woman completely under his spell. He interpreted her increased affection as proof of his success, a sign that she was ready for the next and final step of his plan. He had no idea that he was no longer the director of this play. He had become a character in hers, and she was writing a final act he would never see coming. A few weeks later, Julian decided it was time. He took Chloe to the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, a place she had told him she loved. As they stood in the serene Japanese garden, surrounded by the quiet beauty of nature, he got down on one knee. He held out a box containing a ridiculously large diamond ring. "Chloe Davis, he began, his voice filled with practiced emotion. "You have changed my life. You've shown me what's real and important. Will you marry me?" Chloe looked at him, her eyes welling with tears. They were real tears, but not of joy. They were tears of rage, of grief for the love she thought she had found. But she let them fall, letting him believe they were for him. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with perfectly feigned happiness. "Of course, yes." The news of their engagement sent a triumphant shockwave through Julian's circle. The bet was nearly won. Preparations for the wedding began immediately, a lavish affair orchestrated by Julian to be the ultimate public display of his love. Chloe threw herself into the planning with an enthusiasm that delighted him. She picked out the dress, the flowers, the menu, all while secretly plotting her revenge. She was a meticulous planner, her teacher's mind now focused on a very different kind of curriculum. Every decision, from the guest list to the choice of officiant, was a carefully placed piece in her grand design. She needed witnesses. She needed the very people who had laughed at her to be there for his public downfall. As the wedding day approached, Julian found himself in an unfamiliar state of confusion. The closer he got to the finish line, the less he cared about the bet. He had spent months learning every detail about Chloe, her quiet wit, her fierce intelligence, her unwavering kindness. The person he had set out to manipulate had, against all odds, captured something real within him. He found himself looking forward to their conversations, missing her when she wasn't around. The guilt he had been suppressing was now a constant gnawing presence. He was falling in love with his target, a catastrophic error in his meticulously planned life. But his pride, the very thing that started this whole charade, was too strong. He couldn't back out now. He had to see it through. In the parallel narrative of her own life, Chloe was undergoing a quiet transformation. The betrayal had ignited a fire in her. She started going to the gym, not for Julian, but for herself. She hired a nutritionist. The discipline she had always lacked was now fueled by a singular purpose: to reclaim her own body and her own story. She wasn't just planning a revenge, she was forging a new identity. With every pound she shed, she also shed the layers of self-doubt that had held her back for years. She was becoming the strong, confident woman Julian had pretended to see in her, but she was doing it entirely on her own terms. The day of the wedding arrived, a perfect sun-drenched day in June. The historic St. Patrick's Cathedral was filled to capacity. The pews were a who's who of New York's elite, a sea of couture and quiet judgment. In the front row, Marcus and the others sat with smug, knowing smiles. They were ready to watch the final scene of Julian's masterpiece and collect their losses with a celebratory drink. They nudged each other, whispering jokes, completely unaware that the show they were about to witness was not the one they had paid for. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of lilies and the quiet hum of anticipation. Julian stood at the altar, his heart pounding a nervous, unfamiliar rhythm against his ribs. He looked impeccable in his custom Tom Ford tuxedo, but inside he was a wreck. He looked out at the expectant faces and felt a profound sense of dread. For the first time, he wished he could turn back time, erase the bet, and meet Chloe for real. He just wanted her, not the victory. The grand organ began to play the bridal march, and the massive cathedral doors swung open. Every head turned. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. This was not the woman they were expecting. Walking down the aisle was not the soft, insecure Chloe Davis from the faculty photo. The woman who approached the altar was transformed. Her bespoke wedding gown accentuated a strong, confident figure. Her face, no longer hidden by uncertainty, was radiant and determined. She had lost over 40 pounds, but the most significant change was in her eyes. They held a power and clarity that was arresting. She looked directly at Julian, and for the first time, he saw not adoration, but the cool, calculating gaze of an equal. He felt a chill run down his spine. The ground was shifting beneath his feet, and he didn't know why. She reached the altar, and Julian took her hand. It was steady and cool. The officiant began the ceremony with traditional, comforting words about love and union. Everything seemed perfect, a fairy tale come to life. The guests smiled, captivated by the romance of it all. Julian felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he could still salvage this. Maybe he could make it real. He would confess everything after the honeymoon, beg for her forgiveness, and spend the rest of his life making it up to her. He just needed to get through this ceremony, to make her his wife. Then, he thought, he could fix everything. It was time for the vows. Julian went first. He spoke the words he had prepared, words about destiny and finding his other half. But as he spoke them, looking into her unreadable eyes, they felt like ashes in his mouth. The lies were choking him. He finished, his voice strained. The officiant then turned to Chloe. "And do you, Chloe, take Julian to be your lawfully wedded husband?" A hush fell over the cathedral. Chloe took a deep breath, her gaze never leaving Julian's. She turned slightly to face the crowd, ensuring everyone, especially the men in the front row, could hear her clearly. "I once read that the best stories are about transformation," she began, her voice clear and strong, resonating through the cavernous space. "They're about characters who face a great trial and emerge changed. I thought our story was a romance, a story about an unlikely pair who found love." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "But I was wrong. Our story isn't a romance. It's a tragedy, or perhaps a dark comedy." Whispers erupted throughout the pews. Julian's face went pale. He knew that she knew. "You see," Chloe continued, her voice gaining an edge of steel, "I found out that my entire existence in Julian's life was the subject of a bet." She looked directly at Marcus and his friends, whose smirks had vanished, replaced by masks of horror. A $3 million wager that this man, this paragon of perfection, could manipulate the lonely, overweight schoolteacher into marrying him. The whispers turned into audible gasps. Phones were discreetly being raised, their cameras recording. The fairy tale had just turned into a public execution. Julian felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't speak. "He called me the project." Chloe's voice was now laced with icy contempt. "And I suppose in a way, I was. This whole experience was a project, but not his. Mine." She looked back at Julian, whose face was a mixture of shock and utter devastation. The project was to see if a man so obsessed with control could recognize a real emotion if it hit him in the face. The project was to see how far a group of wealthy, bored men would go for a cheap laugh. The project was for me to finally realize that my worth is not determined by a number on a scale or by the approval of a man like you. Every word was a perfectly aimed blow, landing with devastating accuracy. She then looked at the diamond ring on her finger. "This ring," she said, her voice ringing with finality, "it was a prop. This wedding, it was the stage. And all of you," she gestured to the stunned guests, "are my witnesses." She slowly pulled the ring from her finger and held it out. "So, to answer your question, no, I do not take this man. A bet is a bet, Julian, and you lost." She didn't drop the ring. She placed it gently in the officiant's hand. A final, dignified gesture. The silence in the cathedral was absolute, broken only by the distant sound of a city siren. Julian Thorne stood alone at the altar, a king in a fallen kingdom, publicly and spectacularly ruined. Without another word, Chloe turned and walked back down the aisle. She didn't run. She walked with the unshakable confidence of someone who had just won the most important battle of her life. The heavy doors of the cathedral closed behind her, leaving a tableau of chaos and humiliation in her wake. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The story of the wedding bet went viral before the guests had even left the pews. Julian's brand, Apex Performance, built on authenticity and discipline, was destroyed overnight. Sponsors dropped him, partners pulled out, and his empire began to crumble. He had lost far more than $3 million. He had lost his reputation, his future, and the only woman he had ever truly, if belatedly, loved. Julian tried to reach her, sending flowers, letters, and desperate apologies, but Chloe never responded. She had moved on. She used the experience not as a source of bitterness, but as a catalyst. She started a blog, then wrote a book titled The Project, a sharp, witty, and deeply moving account of her story. It became a bestseller, empowering thousands of people who had felt overlooked and underestimated. She met a man named Liam, an architect who loved her for her brilliant mind and fierce spirit, not as a project to be fixed. She found the kind of love that wasn't a performance, but a quiet, steady partnership. Julian was left with the wreckage of his life, a ghost haunting the ruins of his own making, forever defined by the bet he so arrogantly made and so spectacularly lost. In the end, Julian's cruel game backfired in the most public way imaginable. The plot twist wasn't just that he lost his bet, it was that Chloe had been in control all along, turning his intended humiliation of her into his own epic downfall. He was left with nothing but the bitter taste of defeat, while Chloe built a new life, stronger and more authentic than ever before. She didn't just get revenge, she reclaimed her narrative and found true happiness, proving that the ultimate victory is living well and on your own terms. Thank you for joining us for this incredible story. If you were moved by Chloe's journey, please show your support by hitting the like button, subscribing to our channel, and sharing this video with your friends. Your engagement helps us bring more stories like this to you every day. And now we want to ask you, do you think Julian deserved his fate, or was Chloe's public revenge too harsh? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.